I never meant to fall for her, but somewhere between her calm silence and knowing smile, I realized she wasn't just older. She was everything I'd been searching for without even knowing it. It started on a night I wasn't supposed to be there. I'd wandered into the little cafe at the corner of Maple Street because the rain had picked up, and I needed a place to wait it out. The windows were fogged, the kind of soft blur that makes everything feel slower, more forgiving. Inside, the light was warm and low, gold against wood and whispers. That's when I noticed her. She was standing near a small microphone, reading poetry to a room that had fallen utterly still. There was something in the way she spoke. Not loud, not performative, but steady, as if she wasn't reading to anyone, but rather with them. Her voice carried weight, the kind that doesn't demand attention, it earns it. I remember the exact moment our eyes met. She paused midline only for a second, but it was enough. There was curiosity there, not the kind that flirts, but the kind that sees. I looked away first. Something about her presence made me feel like I was standing too close to a truth I didn't understand yet. She must have been in her early 40s. The faintest traces of time framed her eyes, but they didn't age her. They gave her expression depth, a history. Her hair fell loose, dark with a few quiet streaks of silver that caught the cafe light like threads of wisdom. She was beautiful, yes, but not in the way that steals your breath, in the way that slows it down. When she finished, the crowd clapped softly. I joined in, trying not to seem like I just experienced something personal. She smiled, humble and composed, and began gathering her notes. I told myself to leave, to not overthink it. Yet my legs carried me toward the counter for another coffee I didn't need. That's when she passed by me. Close enough for her perfume, light and floral, to mix with the smell of rain from my jacket. She thanked the barista, her tone soft but confident. I glanced up just in time to meet her eyes again. There was no grand spark, no cinematic pause. Just a look, steady and knowing. She nodded politely, and for some reason that felt like more acknowledgement than I'd had from anyone in weeks. I sat back down with my coffee and pretended to read the menu chalked on the wall, but my thoughts stayed with her. I realized how rare it felt to be in someone's orbit and feel no need to impress them. She didn't draw attention. She held it gently without effort. When she finally left, she walked past the window where I sat. The rain had lightened, and for a moment, she paused outside, looking up at the streetlight before opening her umbrella. I don't know why I watched her so intently. Maybe because, for the first time in a long while, I felt quiet inside, as if some part of me had stopped rushing. I didn't know her name then. I didn't know that night would change me. All I knew was that I wanted to hear her voice again. Told myself I was only going back to the cafe for the peace. The quiet hum of coffee machines, the soft background music, the way rain tapped at the windows like an old song I didn't know I missed. But that wasn't true, and I think I knew it even then. I went back because of her. She was there again, seated by the window this time, a cup of tea in hand and a notebook open in front of her. The same poise, the same ease. She wasn't performing tonight, just existing in that effortless way that makes the world around her seem calmer. I hesitated for a good few minutes before approaching the counter. I ordered coffee I didn't want, trying to look casual while my thoughts were anything but. She looked up from her notebook and smiled. That soft, unassuming smile that carried warmth without invitation. "Back again?" she said. Her voice had that same low calm I remembered, but now it felt directed, personal. "Yeah," I managed. "Guess I liked the poems." She tilted her head slightly, studying me for a moment. "Then that makes two of us," she said, a small laugh following, light, amused, sincere. I laughed too, a little awkwardly. That's how it started. A simple exchange, a quiet spark in the middle of a rainy week. From then on, our conversations became a small ritual. Sometimes they were short, a few words about books or music, about how people forget to notice the weather anymore. Other times, they lasted long enough for the cafe lights to dim around us. She spoke like someone who'd lived enough to stop pretending. When she talked about her favorite authors, she didn't just list names. She spoke about why they mattered. She said stories were how people left traces of themselves in time. I listened like every word had a pulse. Her laugh, that quiet, melodic sound, began to stay with me even after I left. I'd find myself thinking about it on the bus ride home, about the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was trying to find the right words. There was something disarming about her. She didn't rush to fill silence, and somehow that made me want to open up more. One evening, when I mentioned that I sometimes felt like I was drifting, unsure of what I wanted to do or where I was heading, she looked at me, really looked at me. "You don't have to have it all figured out yet," she said gently. "Just don't stop being curious." It was simple advice, but it hit deeper than she probably realized. That night, walking home, her words stayed in my chest like a slow echo. I realized I wasn't just drawn to her age or confidence. It was the way she saw the world, how she noticed the small, beautiful things that most people ignored. She wasn't teaching me how to live. She was reminding me how to feel. And as much as I tried to deny it, the truth was clear. I wasn't just looking forward to the cafe anymore. I was looking forward to her. It was one of those nights where the city felt smaller. Rain blurring the edges of everything, headlights melting into soft streaks of gold. The kind of night that makes you think too much. We'd stayed at the cafe later than usual, both of us pretending we hadn't noticed the staff stacking chairs. The world outside looked cold and quiet, and when she offered me a ride home, I didn't even hesitate. Her car smelled faintly of lavender and leather, calm, familiar, like her. I sat beside her, unsure of what to do with my hands, unsure of what to say. The wipers kept time with the silence, each sweep clearing a little space in the fogged glass. Streetlights slid across her face as she drove, painting her expression in fragments. Focus, thought, quiet. "I didn't realize how late it got," I said, my voice too low, too careful. She smiled, eyes still on the road. Good company tends to bend time a little. The warmth in her tone lingered. It wasn't flirtation, not really, just sincerity. But it was enough to make my chest feel tight. I wanted to say something back, something that would match what I was feeling, but the words refused to come. Instead, I just watched her. The way her fingers rested lightly on the steering wheel, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the quiet confidence in every motion. When we reached my street, the rain was still steady. She pulled over, the hum of the engine filling the silence. For a moment, neither of us moved. "Thank you," I said finally, though it felt small compared to everything else I wanted to say. She turned to me, her expression soft, unreadable. "You don't have to thank me. I enjoy the company." It should have been simple, but the way she said it made my pulse stumble. I nodded, fumbling for the handle. That's when it happened. Our hands brushed as I reached for my bag. Just that brief touch, warm skin against skin, but it sent a current through the space between us. She froze too, eyes flicking up to meet mine. Neither of us pulled away immediately. The air felt heavier, like something unspoken had suddenly taken shape. "I should probably go," I murmured. Her lips curved, just barely. "Get home safe." I stepped out into the rain, closing the door gently behind me. The cold air hit my face, but my skin still buzzed from where her hand had grazed mine. I turned once before heading up the path. She was still there, headlights dim, watching. When our eyes met through the wet glass, she gave a faint nod before driving away. I stood under the rain long after she left. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, aware, alive. I didn't know what this was becoming, or what lines I was crossing just by wanting her near. But one thing had become clear. There was something between us now. Something real. It wasn't just admiration anymore. It was wanting, quiet, cautious, but undeniable. And it terrified me how natural it felt. For a while, it felt like we'd found an easy rhythm. Coffee on quiet evenings, conversations that drifted effortlessly between laughter and silence. But comfort has a way of drawing attention, and soon the world began to notice. It started with a passing comment from a friend, harmless on the surface. "You've been spending a lot of time with her, huh?" he'd said, smirking, eyebrows raised. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't mean anything. But the moment passed like a splinter, small, yet impossible to ignore. That night, as I lay in bed, the words replayed in my mind. Not because they were cruel, but because they carried something I didn't want to admit, judgment. I realized how visible this had become, how easily others could label what they didn't understand. She was older, composed, quietly magnetic. I was still learning how to stand still in my own skin. The next few days I kept my distance, not intentionally at first, but out of hesitation. I told myself I was busy, distracted. Yet every evening without her voice felt heavier, emptier. The cafe didn't feel the same. When I finally saw her again, it was at the riverfront, the one we often walked along when the air was cool and the world felt kinder. The sun had just begun to set, casting long ribbons of gold across the water. She stood near the railing, her scarf fluttering gently in the breeze. "You've been quiet," she said when I approached. There was no accusation in her tone, just observation, like she was offering me space to be honest. "I guess I just needed time to think," I replied, though the words felt too small for what I meant. She nodded, eyes following the slow current. "That's fair. Thinking is good." Then, after a pause, she added softly, "As long as it doesn't turn into running." The words landed deeper than I expected. I looked at her then, really looked. The faint lines near her eyes, the calm steadiness in her posture, the patience that came from having lived long enough to stop chasing things that hurt. "I wasn't running," I said quietly. "I just didn't know what this looks like to everyone else." She turned toward me, her expression unreadable. "You care too much about everyone else." Then, with a small sigh, she looked back at the river. "I understand, though. People always notice what doesn't fit their picture of normal." Her voice carried no bitterness, just quiet truth, that somehow made it worse. The breeze picked up, carrying the faint scent of her perfume. Her scarf brushed against my arm. A light touch, accidental, but it felt like forgiveness. I wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her that the noise of the world didn't matter, but I didn't. I just stood there, side by side with her, listening to the water move. After a long silence, she smiled faintly. "Don't apologize," she said, though I hadn't spoken yet. "You're still learning how to be seen without explanation." That night, walking home, her words stayed with me. I realized she wasn't disappointed in me. She was teaching me, without ever trying to. And for the first time, I understood. This wasn't a story about age. It was about courage, the quiet kind that chooses connection even when the world whispers otherwise. That I didn't plan to see her that night. It was one of those restless evenings where thoughts loop endlessly, half guilt, half longing. The city was quiet, wrapped in the hush that comes after rain, and without fully understanding why, I found myself standing outside her apartment building. The soft glow from her window told me she was home. I hesitated, heart caught somewhere between caution and need, then climbed the steps and knocked. When she opened the door, surprise flickered across her face, then softened into something like concern. She was in a loose gray sweater, her hair unstyled, the kind of effortless comfort that made her seem even more real. "Hey," I said, voice unsteady. "I just needed to talk." She studied me for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." Her place was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels lived in. Shelves of books, faint scent of vanilla candles, a small lamp casting honey-colored light across the room. I sat on the edge of the couch, unsure of where to begin. "I'm sorry," I started, eyes fixed on my hands, "for disappearing for a bit. Things just got loud." She poured tea, 2 cups, and sat across from me, one leg folded under her. "Loud how?" I met her gaze. "People talk. They notice." And I let that get in my head. I started thinking too much about what this looks like. Her expression didn't change, but I could feel the distance those words created. She looked down at her cup, then back up, calm but guarded. "And what does this look like to you?" I hesitated. "I don't know anymore. I just know that when I'm with you, everything feels right, easier." But then I start second-guessing what that means. For a moment, she said nothing. The clock on the wall ticked softly, filling the silence between us. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle, but her eyes carried something deeper. Fear. Maybe. You make me feel seen, she said quietly. That doesn't happen often anymore. But I'm also afraid. Afraid that what feels peaceful for me might become complicated for you. Her honesty caught me off guard. There was no pretense, no defense, just truth. And something in that broke through the last of my hesitation. I don't care if it's complicated, I said, the words spilling out before I could weigh them. You make me want to be better, calmer, more real. I don't even know how to explain it. You just do. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable, then finally smiled, small, tender, almost sad. That's a dangerous thing to say, she murmured. Because I want to believe you. I moved closer, not to close the distance but to exist within it. The air between us felt charged, but still respectful, human. Our hands met halfway, fingers brushing, then intertwining naturally, as if neither of us needed permission anymore. I'm not asking for anything, I whispered. I just don't want to keep pretending this doesn't matter. Her eyes glistened with something unspoken. Understanding, maybe relief. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she let out a slow breath and leaned her forehead gently against mine. For the first time, silence didn't feel uncertain. Felt like truth. That night, there were no promises, no labels. Just two people finally brave enough to stop hiding from what was already there. The days that followed felt lighter, quieter. Not because the world had changed, but because I had. The tension that used to follow me around like a shadow had eased. We didn't need to define anything or talk about it constantly. It was just there, the understanding between us, unspoken but steady. We met again at the cafe where it all began. She was already there when I walked in, sitting by the same window, sunlight spilling over her like memory. It had been weeks since that night in her apartment, and though nothing had been said outright, everything between us had shifted. When she looked up and saw me, her smile was soft, the kind that reaches the eyes and stays there for a while. I sat down across from her, trying not to notice how familiar this felt, how her presence had started to feel like home. Still drinking coffee you don't like? She teased gently. I laughed. It's tradition now. The conversation flowed easily like it always did. But underneath the small talk, there was something deeper, a shared stillness. Neither of us felt the need to fill every silence anymore. Her hand rested on the table close to mine. I didn't think before reaching out this time, just brushed my fingers against hers. A simple, wordless gesture. She didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her hand slightly so our palms met. That one small act said everything we'd both been avoiding. We're here. We're choosing this. The sunlight through the window shifted as the afternoon went on, the cafe slowly emptying around us. Somewhere behind the counter, a jazz record played, soft, nostalgic, the kind of song that fits perfectly into moments you never want to end. I watched her trace circles on her teacup absent-mindedly, her thumb moving in slow rhythm with the music. You look like you're thinking too hard, she said, smiling without looking up. Maybe I am, I admitted. I keep wondering if we're allowed to have something this quiet. She looked up then, that steady, knowing gaze that had pulled me in from the very first night. We don't need permission to be at peace, she said. It's rare enough. We should protect it. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. Instead, I squeezed her hand lightly. Her eyes softened, and for a long while we just sat there. Two people against the hum of a world too loud for what we'd found. Outside, the city moved on. Cars, conversations, rain threatening again in the clouds. But inside that cafe, everything felt suspended. I remember thinking how strange it was that happiness could be so quiet, that love could sound like the faint clink of cups and the low murmur of music. She glanced out the window, then back at me. Do you ever think about how all of this started? All the time, I said. And every time, it feels like I almost didn't notice the moment my life changed. Her smile deepened, a look that said she felt it too. When we finally stood to leave, I didn't want to let go of her hand. The world outside was bright and restless, but I didn't feel rushed anymore. The noise, the judgment, the uncertainty. All of it had faded into something small and distant. For the first time, it didn't matter who saw us. What mattered was that she was here, beside me, and everything else could fall away. Months later, life found a rhythm. Not the wild, unpredictable kind I once thought love was supposed to have, but something softer, quieter, the kind that makes you exhale without realizing you'd been holding your breath. Mornings became our favorite time. The world still half asleep, sunlight spilling lazily through her kitchen window. She'd hum while making tea, wearing that same oversized sweater I'd seen the first night I came to her apartment. I'd sit on the counter, coffee in hand, just watching. Not because she was doing anything remarkable, but because everything she did seemed to matter. There was something grounding in the simplicity. No performances, no need to impress. Just the kind of closeness that comes from existing side by side, comfortably silent. Sometimes, she'd catch me staring. "What?" she'd ask with that amused smile, her eyes teasing but gentle. "Nothing," I'd reply. "Just thinking how calm feels strange." "Strange is good," she'd say, handing me a slice of toast. "It means you're not chasing the noise anymore." It was true. I'd spent so long believing that love had to be intense, dramatic, a rush of adrenaline and chaos. But she taught me that peace could be just as powerful. Maybe more. She showed me that love doesn't always arrive like a storm. Sometimes, it slips in quietly, steady as breath, warm as morning light. We didn't talk much about the difference anymore, our ages, what people thought, what might come next. Those conversations had faded, replaced by something more natural. The world hadn't changed, but we had. The stares, the whispers, they didn't reach us the same way anymore. We'd built our own quiet world, and it was enough. One evening, we walked by the river where we used to meet when everything still felt uncertain. The same soft wind carried across the water. The same fading sunlight brushed against her hair. But this time, there was no hesitation, no distance. I took her hand, and she leaned into me, resting her head lightly against my shoulder. "You know," I said, "I used to think love was supposed to fix everything." She smiled faintly. "And now I think it's supposed to make you see everything clearer, slower." She didn't answer, but the way her hand tightened around mine was enough. We stood there for a long time, watching the light fade. Later that night, I found myself replaying the journey. From that first quiet evening in the cafe to this moment, standing beside her, feeling more myself than I ever had. She hadn't tried to change me. She'd simply seen me, and that was what changed everything. As I watched her laugh about something small, a shared inside joke, a moment too ordinary to remember later, I realized the truth of it all. She wasn't just older. She wasn't just wiser. She was everything I didn't know I needed: patience, stillness, depth. She taught me that love doesn't demand to be loud to be real. Sometimes it's the gentle presence that reminds you to breathe. And as I looked at her, smiling over the rim of her teacup, I knew this was it. Not the ending of a story, but the quiet beginning of something that finally felt right.